Throughout my time in the United States, as you can tell, I am Chinese, I am Asian, and I've seen my fair share of racism. It's not great, it is very ugly. However, when we look to the issue of race, what's most important to realize, and I really love how Martin Luther King puts it, he says to judge people by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. Fundamentally, this is how we should be viewing race, that it shouldn't exist. It doesn't matter, it's a non-factor. However, when we look to how education is being taught in today's schools, it is being taken into account, and not in the way that you would traditionally think. Instead, it's been shifted to kind of make up for past discrimination. This is not good. This needs to stop. So when looking at the prompt, how has racial unrest in 2021 and 2020 impacted the United States education system? We'll be looking at three main points. First, we'll be defining what exactly has been going on within the education system, which you can label as CRT, or critical race theory. Second, we'll be looking at the specific racial unrest that sparked this entire conversation. And then third, we will be looking at the future and what that holds for the United States, specifically our education system as well. So what exactly is critical race theory, or CRT? This comes from the Heritage Foundation. They say it's basically a Marxist ideology that takes Marxist ideals and shifts it onto the idea of race. So to take a step back, let's look to the Communist Manifesto, because I read it for some class that I had to take. The Communist Manifesto essentially says this: capitalism is the system. That system is used to oppress the lower class. Thus, the solution is to tear down that system, being capitalism, and make everyone equal. Critical race theory takes this and it moves it to race. They say this certain group has been oppressed because the system exists. Even according to the Washington Post, who is arguing for critical race theory, they say racism exists because it is built into the law. It is a systemic issue throughout the entire law. And the only solution, thus then, as Marxism states, is to tear down the entire system. That's what critical race theory is. It takes Marxism and shifts it onto racism. This is not good. We do not want to be tearing down our systems. But secondly, we'll be looking at the role of racial unrest. Why does this equate to education whatsoever? As we all know, around a year ago, according to CNN, many racial protests were sparked because of the death of George Floyd back in June last year. That wasn't so great. That wasn't so pretty to look at. However, it did spark this conversation. It sparked many conversations, and many different authors came out and spoke out about it. Two very specific ones are very large proponents of CRT. They're Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo, who wrote Right for Children. Let me go ahead and quote something from Ibram X. Kendi. This is from the National Review. They say, quote, "The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." End quote. This is the core of what critical race theory is. It's to say, we've been discriminated against, so we're going to discriminate against you. This is literally just racism used to fight racism. And the worst part is, when you go ahead and have all these different conversations, well, not the conversations, but the spreading of critical race theory throughout the entire United States, that bleeds into the education sector. That bleeds into everyday life. Let's go ahead and look to another source, the American Enterprise Institute. This time they're looking at Cindy Martin, who's the Deputy Secretary of our education, the federal education branch, or not branch, but that subset of the executive cabinet. Essentially, she's been known to cite Ibram X. Kendi, and they've also been to say that being colorblind within schools should not be allowed. When we go back to what Dr. Martin King said within his famous I Had a Dream speech, this is the exact opposite of what he said. He said you don't look at race whatsoever, you instead look at the content of their character. And instead what's going on within our education system right now, as allowed by our federal government, specifically the Department of Education, they're saying you need to look at race to try and remedy for past discrimination. That is discrimination, that is racist. That should not be allowed. And it gets even worse though. According to Fox News, they were looking at a New York Times, or not a New York Times, but a New York education, school within New York City. It's gone so far to the point that we're taking objective matters such as math and calling them racist because they're part of the system. Math is like the most objective thing you can have. 1 + 1 is 2. There's no other way to put it. It is simply objective. And abstract, yet somehow they have twisted the entire system, said you need to tear it down, and called it racist. This makes absolutely no sense, and the parents specifically are noticing, which is actually one benefit of the COVID-19 pandemic. Everything got online, all the online schooling. Some parents actually decided to start listening into what their kids were being taught. I have many experiences of my parents telling me about how specifically Chinese parents, they're now listening to what their children are being taught. They've immigrated from China. They know exactly what Marxism looks like. They see critical race theory being taught in their schools, and they're thinking, what is this? We need to get our children out, which is why my parents are trying to push more homeschooling throughout the entire Chinese community. But this is an issue that is pretty widespread throughout education. Luckily for us, the United States has not gone too far down that hole yet, which is the third point. A bleak yet optimistic future. What do I mean by this? So it's pretty bad. The United States has already gotten to the point where this is being taught everywhere throughout education. But it's not too bad yet. Because according to the Hill, you have many different, Republican states that are specifically legislating that you are not allowed to teach critical race theory in schools. One example is Ron DeSantis in Florida. He said, well, don't teach critical race theory. This is a bad idea. And it was outlawed. Same has gone through Arkansas, quite a bit in Texas as well. Many of these different Republican states have all passed legislation to ban CRT being taught through our schools. We also can look towards the midterms because the parents are actually noticing this happening. There's going to be pushback. I can't wait for the 2022 midterm elections where there's going to be quite a bit of pushback against the Democratic Party from the Republican Party because they've seen how it's affecting our education. So the racial unrest in 2020 and 2021 has impacted the United States education system in a very negative way. But people are noticing, and now they're saying,